Okay, I'm gonna about 2 more minutes here before I open this meeting up to allow the attendee list to populate. Okay, if everyone's ready, I'd like to call the 7 o'clock meeting, 7 o'clock Hopkinton Town Council meeting on February 16th, 2021 to order with a moment of silent meditation and a salute to the flag. And Scott, if you could start us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of
To
America
the flag of the
and
United,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, here we go. I'd like to make a statement that no votes were taken in executive session. Do I have a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Counselor Hurst, I move that we seal the minutes of the executive session.
Counselor Geary, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hurst, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Davis, aye.
And Moffett, aye. Okay, up first here, we have a hearing, a proposed zoning district use table amendment to prohibit additional gas/diesel stations. Open a hearing on a proposed text amendment to the town's zoning ordinance district use table. The intent of the proposed amendments is to prohibit any additional gas, diesel stations to allow electric charging stations in commercial, manufacturing, and neighborhood business zones, including the two current gas stations. This proposed amendment has been introduced and sponsored by former Councilor Sylvia Thompson. Scheduled on November 2nd, 2020 Town Council agenda, the hearing was set for February 16th, 2021. Proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance appendix A, chapter 135, section 5, district use regulations, as shown in bold italics. I have one question before we get going. Lisa, I had noticed earlier there was a
I'm sorry, I lost you.
reporter or a stenographer. Is that
For both.
we have a for both?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
You're breaking up on occasion.
Okay. All right. No, my question was is there a court reporter for this hearing? I had noticed someone had
Yes.
signed in earlier. Okay. I just wanted to
Yes,
make sure she
and
was
for the-
present.
Yeah, for both. Yep.
Okay. All right. I don't see her on here.
Steve, did you get kicked out, Ms. President, did you get kicked over to attendee list?
Yes. Can you say it again, Mike?
I said she didn't get kicked over to the attendees list, did she?
Hold on, no, I had asked her to come back at 7 o'clock. We were in executive session. I just want to make sure we're all set here. I'm looking at the attendee list and I do not see her name on here.
Well, perhaps she will log in as we go forward.
Okay. All right. So let's start this
Well,
off.
Steve, there are a couple of hands up, so you know, so I don't know if one of those.
Oh, sure. Let me check. I see some hands up. Phone number 486-4234. Are you the court reporter? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Hi, this is the court reporter. Yeah, I'm here, over the phone because I tried to log back in and it said that I was kicked out of the registration. So I'm not able to log in through Zoom, but I'm here over the phone.
Okay. Is that going to work for you?
Yeah, as long as everyone, speaks into their microphones and stuff. If I'm able to become a participant
Okay,
or a
excellent.
panelist, it's easier because then I can interrupt without having to press *6 or whatever. Is that
Yeah,
is that possible?
let me get, just give me 1 minute here. I apologize.
Sure.
Chris, are you
Yep.
there, Chris?
So I noticed when you joined before the executive session that you were joining from 2 different devices. One of those devices I removed, the other one you left with arbitrarily. So if you could rejoin
Yep.
with whatever device that was.
Yeah, I did rejoin. I did rejoin with my laptop, but it said that I was kicked out of the meeting, the registration or whatever. So I haven't been able to log back in with my laptop.
If possible, when you're logging into that laptop again, could you use a different email address and that might allow you back in?
Use a different email address.
When it should ask you for one when you join the meeting.
Yep. I used the same email address.
But if you use a different one, it might let you back in, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I got you.
When we remove somebody from the meeting, they're removed for good.
I see. Okay. I mean, I have done them whereby I'm over the phone, if that's okay. Like I said, if I'm a panelist and I can just interrupt, if everybody can hear me, I've done them like this before, but I can try to go ahead and log back in here.
Sure. I will leave you unmuted so that way you can speak up if you need to speak up.
Yeah, if that's okay, I'll mute myself if I've got background noise, but if you could leave me unmuted, that way all I do is have to press that unmute button and interrupt if I need to.
Excellent. So we'll just leave it the way it is right now, and you are unmuted right now, and we will move forward with the meeting.
Okay, and just as long as everybody states their name like they have been, that'll be very helpful.
Sure. Okay, so that's a reminder to anyone
And you
who
are,
speaks,
hello?
any counselor,
Yeah,
any attendee,
And
or any. I am Steve Moffett. I'm
yep. So, hello?
hello. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
here.
so I am getting, at the same time that Liz was having difficulties with the connection, I'm having difficulties with the connection too at that same time. So I'm not sure, there are some issues as far as connectivity at the moment, but I'll do the best I can.
Thank you.
All righty.
Okay. All right. With that being said, first off, I apologize to everybody for this hiccup. Is the sponsor present? Is Sylvia Thompson present? If you are, please raise your hand, Sylvia. Is this Sylvia?
This is Mimi. I'm just trying to register you're hearing me.
Yes.
Yes, your hand is up. So I'm actually looking for Sylvia Thompson. Thank you. Sylvia, are you present? If so, please raise your hand. Yeah, I do not see Sylvia raising her hand. Okay. So Lisa, if you could chime in, if Sylvia is not here, how should I proceed with this?
Well, there's no obstruction to you moving forward.
Okay,
I could read her memo if you like, when she introduced it back in 2020.
sure, yes.
If you like. All right, so she had addressed it to the town council. that she was requesting an amendment to be placed on the council agenda on November 2nd meeting in order to set a hearing date. And she proposed the ordinance amendments so that, as is posted on the website, that the amendments in bold italics would not allow any more new gasoline diesel service stations in any zone. And it would add an electric charging stations to those existing gasoline stations that are in the zones. For Section 8, non-conforming development notation C, the addition, enlargement, expansion, replacement, or intensification of a non-conforming development shall be allowed by special use permit. And then she added in italics as the change unless prohibited by in the district use table. And so the district use table was published. There was a memo that went to the planning board to see if there was an advisory opinion. I received a notation back from the planner's office that the planning board did not offer or render an advisory opinion to the town council on the proposed amendments to the district use table. So that would be a matter of you discussing it and perhaps opening it up to the public for their discussion, and then you would proceed to vote on how you would like to go forward with this.
So thank you very much, Lisa. All right,
You're
with that being, with that being said, I would like to open up to council discussion. Would anyone like to start off the discussion or have any?
Bob Marvel here. I
Anything.
just have one question regarding these items in the use table 554 and 559. Are they already defined in the definition section? And if so, I'm wondering if we could get the definitions of them. Just curious.
I would not know that. I would not have the answer to that. That's why I was kind of hoping Sylvia was here. I mean, she is the sponsor of this amendment. Lisa, do you have any knowledge of that?
I do not. And it may be, since Sylvia has not participated in the hearing, she did get the agenda, and I was anticipating that she was going to be present. Perhaps it would be a matter of just continuing this until you get your answers to your questions. And if there are any other questions, perhaps we should make a list, and then when we open it up again, we'll have the answers to the questions that were asked.
Sure. With that being said, I think I would like to offer up potential maybe comments from the council. And if anyone has any comments, they can express that. And if not, I'll open it up to some public comment. And if no one comments, then we will consider a motion to continue this hearing.
Hey, Mr. President, Council Geary.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think in the light of the sponsor not being here.
Just go ahead, Council Geary.
Yep. In the light of the sponsor not being available, there are some questions. I know Councilor Marvel just expressed some. I have some too on this. I recommend, I think we should make a motion to maybe table this if all the other councilors agree, and maybe come back when Sylvia is available.
Mr. President, Scott Bill Hurst, I'm in favor of waiting for Councilor Thompson's input. She's served many terms on the town council, and I have certainly served with her in the past. But I would believe that some people probably want to comment, and I see no problem taking some general comments from the public and still keep it open for Councilor Thompson to chime in. And also, it's my belief that we don't know at this point electric charging stations where it's going to go. I know it's new. We have one up at exit 1 in the park and ride, and it seems to be a wave of the future, although most of us don't drive electric cars, but it seems to have potential as an idea, and but I think it's best for the council to have some input from the public and the stenographer will take down all the notes and comments from the council and the public, and we can always have a record of that, and we can certainly broach that with former Councilor Thompson. Obviously, I don't support closing this hearing without her input. Thank you. Councilor
All right, thank you,
Scott.
Scott. So with that, thank you, Scott. And with that said, I'll open it up to a public comment, and then I will entertain a motion to continue this hearing. So at this moment, if any attendees have any comments or just comments, the proposer is not in attendance, but if you had any comments to make, now would be the time.
Mr. President, I'd like to entertain a motion that,
Hold on one second, Scott. Scott, hold on one second.
certainly,
Scott, hold on one second. Jim Lanfear, is that you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
364-9218?
That is correct, yes. Jim Lamphia, Town
You
Planner.
had your hand raised. Did you want to make a comment?
I just want to make one simple comment that in the event that you continue this public hearing, I'd like it to be at the second meeting in March. That will enable me to get this on the March 3rd Planning Board agenda, and you'll have an advisory opinion from planning at that time.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jim. We will absolutely entertain that. So I see one other hand. I don't know. Joe Moreau, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Steve. No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. All
You're
right, not seeing any other hands up.
Mr. President, if I could, just for a moment, I think I may have an answer for the question that was raised earlier about the definitions. I did pull up the zoning ordinance on the town.
Just state your name, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve Seipold,
Just state your
the
name.
solicitor. This is with the caveat that the zoning ordinance on the website is not totally up to date, but this seems, as far as I can see, there are no, these three items in this table in the proposed ordinance, they're not defined terms in the definition section. Gasoline service stations is a line item in the use table currently. But gasoline diesel service stations is not, an electric charging stations. I do not see that. So I think those would be new. And then gasoline service stations is in the use table, but I don't see a definition for it.
Okay, thank you.
So it may be advisable to the proponent of the ordinance to maybe include those definitions.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr.
Jim
President.
Lanfear? Yes.
Yes.
I saw your hand was still up, Jim. Did you have anything else to add?
No, not really beyond my first comment, but as long as Solicitor Seipold weighed in on this, I would agree with him that you're going to find that most of the uses that are in the use table currently are not defined. Some zoning ordinances in other towns do define these things. Gasoline service station is, I want to say it pretty much speaks for itself, but it does allow the zoning official to have a little bit of discretion as to how they interpret that to be defined. And so the 554 down below in bold, I take that to be a replacement of the existing 554 with the addition of diesel along with gasoline. And then 559 would be a brand new use number. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, Mr. President, Councilor Geary.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue this to another date?
Mr. President, Scott Bill Hurst, I move that this be move to the second
15th.
council meeting in March.
The 15th.
Lisa, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, do I have a second to
Mr. President, Councilor Geary, second.
Councilor Hurst's motion? All in favor?
Aye.
First, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Moffat, aye.
Davis, aye.
Okay, motion passes. It's scheduled for the second meeting in March, second town council meeting in March. All right. Up next, we have proposed zoning ordinance amendment. Reconvene hearing on a petition to consider amendments to the Hopkinton zoning ordinance, including the farm viability ordinance in chapter 246 entitled Non-Residential Photovoltaic Solar Energy Systems, as amended January 22nd, 2019, filed by Thomas and Cynthia Skolko, 192 Woodville Road, Hopkinton, RI 02833, and 132 East 95th Street, New York, New York. The application is filed in accordance with Section 16 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Hopkinton as amended. The hearing was continued to February 16th, 2021 on January 19th, 2021. The proposal would amend sections 2, 5, 5.3, 5.5-7, and 10 of the zoning ordinance in order to substantially revise the manner in which major, minor, accessory, and contaminated solar energy system proposals, including roof-mounted and commercial solar energy systems, are considered and approved throughout the town of Hopkinton. Proposed changes include, but are not limited to, limiting principal use, commercial solar energy systems to manufacturing zones, requiring land development project review for principal use / commercial solar energy systems, requiring special use permit approval for such uses, altering the dimensional requirements for such uses and establishing a precedence of approvals when multiple approvals are required. The application describing the proposed amendments is a 22-page document that, if adopted, would represent a comprehensive overhaul of the town's regulation of all proposed solar energy systems throughout town. Is the applicant and representative present?
Good evening, Council President Moffat. Peter Squires on behalf of the applicants, Tom and Cynthia Skolko.
Thank you, sir. Lisa, all fees paid and notices were posted?
The filing fees were paid, the notices were posted appropriately. We will be billing out any fees incurred, including the advertising, which I just received the billing for.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lisa. With that, I'm going to open up this hearing for council discussion. If anyone would like to start off with anything that they have, please do now and just state your name for the record.
Councilor Hurst, I'm not going to, I'm not interested in making any comments. I think during this whole process, I've spoken a number of times, and I'm really interested in the public speaking in their a view on this this ordinance, and just trying to and we certainly, when we vote on the final product, we'll be able to comment, but I really am interested in hearing what the public says. I think the council has spent multiple meetings discussing their views and things of that nature. Thank you.
Mr. President, Councilor Geary.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Geary.
I agree with Councilor Hurst. I am very interested to see what the public has to say on this. I do not have any comments, but like I said, I would like to hear what the public has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Geary. Thank you. Councilor Davis, do you have anything?
Yes.
You have the floor.
Okay, well, I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed in terms of the contaminated site solar energy systems, and I went online and got a list from RIDEM of the contaminated sites in Hopkinton. There are about 9 of them. 4 of them have been remediated, and I actually am changing my mind back to the original line where contaminated sites should be permitted in manufacturing and not permitted in the other lines. And I know that means that if we went that route, that we would have to reinsert a lot of the verbiage that was about contaminated sites that we got rid of at the last time. So I understand that, but that's the way I feel right now.
Is there a, is this Counselor Moffett? With that being said, Sharon, is there, you mentioned section 309 contaminated site solar energy system. What particularly did you want to, were your recommendations for changing on the use table here? Is
I would change under manufacturing, I would change it from an N to a P, which is the way it looked. It was originally suggested
Okay.
in and everything else in all the other categories, but a P in manufacturing.
okay? Is there any discussion on that? Anybody have any discussion? Or any feedback?
Bill Hurst, I think my views on the contamination and solar has been well spoken in past meetings, and I'm not going to elaborate any more tonight. Thank you.
Now-
My only
Go
comment
ahead,
is
Bob.
if we are going to revisit that and make a change for the manufacturing, I would rather see it in S instead of a P, because I think that contaminated sites should always get more scrutiny on.
That's fine.
Councilman Hurst, again, I support that. As you well know, I had suggested, as the minutes will show tonight, that I recommended special use because you don't have to, the zoning board does not have to agree to something. So I was a big supporter of the special use. It gives town government the option of using your own judgment based upon the facts presented. So I do support the special use permit. I just think that if you have a problem, you try to address it. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. President, Council Geary,
Thank you, Scott.
I concur with Councilor Marvel on his suggestion.
Thank you. This is Counselor Moffett. I too, like Sharon, have done a lot of thinking about this and seen, what she presented from the DEM and having looked at the sites that are known contaminated sites. I think this is probably a good idea. So I'm definitely going to be in agreement with the rest of the counselors. So that's how I feel. So I know, as Sharon said, by adding that is going to obviously add more language or add language back to this amendment. So I'm not sure if that's something that we go through it again tonight, or if that's something that the applicant would go back and do. I believe it was, as Sharon said, it was originally in there with that language regarding that. Do you have any comment about that, Mr. Squares?
So yeah, I could put that language back in. It depends on whether the council feels that they're familiar with the language enough tonight, or they have a document in front of them that they can feel comfortable to vote on or scrutinize. If you don't, I can draft it up again, put the language back in and circulate that again. I do know that the last draft I circulated also might have needed some tweaks with regard to ground-mounted solar as an accessory use. I don't think I captured everything. I tried to, but I don't think I captured everything that was in the discussion the last time around. So I could work that language in, include the language about the contaminated site solar, and then you circulated it for another meeting at some point in the future.
Because that's also going to bring some of the other things that we struck out of here as far as talking about equipment and all that other stuff, or whatever it was here. I'm not, I can't find it here right in my notes, but so. Does anyone else have any other discussion on that as far as, Sharon, do you have anything to add?
I think at one point we were talking about accessory solar. The ground-mounted accessory solar had to be by permit only. I'm just kind of rethinking about that too, but
Well, that's, I mean, this is Counselor Moffett. I'm going to stand by that. I just think that if, you know, if we're going to allow ground-mounted solar, I think there needs to be just another level of scrutiny because of the fact that we know that roof-mounted is going on a roof. So, I mean, I just think we need to protect neighbors and neighborhoods, and that's how I feel, and that's what I'm going to stand by.
okay.
I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that.
President Moffett, Council Gary, I think we had talked about this at extent on
Yes.
size and stuff like this. For one of the solicitors, maybe say, wouldn't this add another added expense if somebody wanted to do this?
It would. I mean, I can chime in, you know, I mean, obviously it's going to add a little bit more of an expense, but I mean, the reason why I proposed it because I didn't want to completely not allow it. I wanted to give people the option to do it. And I just assumed that anyone who was going to go through these steps to have the ground mounted solar would probably be able to, I think is the best way to put it here. I just want to make sure if someone's going to put ground mounted solar in their yard, that it's going to be placed in the proper spot. And I think the language that is in this proposed ordinance in the clean draft is the best way to go about guaranteeing that it is just not arbitrarily put on a piece of property anywhere, anyhow. So that's my argument as to why I recommended what I did.
And we're talking, say if somebody,
We're talking about the residential ground mounted accessory solar.
yes, I understand that. Council Gary here. I agree. We never really came up with a number on exactly how many square feet. I think we had played around with the number of 400 square feet, which equals 400 square yards, which equals
Square
20.
feet.
Yeah, which equals what, a 20 by 20 panel, I think Sharon said. I think Sharon did send some pictures in the pamphlet.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. This is Sharon Davis. I think that it should be, the size should be based on what National Grid thinks is you know, the equivalent of 100% or even at 125% of their usage. The way National Grid determines what you need, that language should be in there. I don't think it should be I don't think it should be 400 feet or whatever. I think it should be whatever is necessary so that you can replace your usage 100% to 125%. That's what I think. And it should be decided by the utility, not by us.
President Moffett, Council Gary here. I concur with Councilor Davis on those numbers.
Thank you, Council Gary. This is Councilor Moffett. I'm going to agree on that also. I think 100%, I mean, to 125, but I think we need to nail it down. It's, either 100, 125%. We could allow 125 to maybe compensate for, if somebody put a pool in or somebody got an electric car of some sort and they wanted to, to be able to have that flexibility. I think that's probably the best route to go. After thinking about it, limiting it to a certain amount is probably not the best thing to do, but to limit it to, say 125% usage, I think that's probably the best way to go. To kind of help someone who is, trying to be, environmentally conscious, the ability to potentially add on.
Yeah, President Moffett, Council.
So I'm in agreement.
Can I just offer a theory real quick? I like that idea.
Sure.
We go 100 to 125%. But in today's world, what happens if, say, your parents come to live with you, or if you have somebody that needs to come to live with you? If we kind of just say, okay, you can only do this much, I don't want to have somebody come back and say, hey, well, we can't get this much, even now where we're at. But I think with the 100 to 125 range gives it, in their case, like you said, a swimming pool, mom and dad, somebody builds an in-law, something like that, that gives them a little bit more flexibility. And I'm in agreement with you on that.
Right. So you are, this is Councilor Moffett. You are, so you're agreeing that 100 to 125% range is a good range?
President Moffett, Councilor Gary, I concur with you and Councilor Davis.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? Bob Marvel, do you have anything to add to that?
So, yeah, this is Bob Marvel. So I guess I'm still a little bit unclear on the use table. Have we changed it from an S to a P, or are we considering that? Because I don't.
S is fine,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay.
S is I'm absolutely, this is Councilor Moffett. I'm happy with an S.
Okay. I'd like to keep it as an S too.
Yep. So are we all in agreement? I think we can move forward past that. So we're going to change the use table on contaminated site solar energy system in the manufacturing area from an N to an S. And then the language in our definitions to touch on what we were just discussing, the accessory solar energy system. And it states that here we have it no more than 100% of the energy that is necessary to support the principal use of the parcel on which the solar energy system is located. So, we've thrown out 100, we've thrown out 125. I would like to get a consensus on this if that's possible. I know Councilor Geary is fine with the 125%. I'm fine with 125%. Sharon, do you have any opinion?
I'm fine with 125%.
Okay. Scott, how about you?
I'll go along with that.
All right. Councilor Marvel, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, this is Bob Marvel. Yes, I agree.
Okay. I mean, I think it's fair. I think it's going to allow, for just to kind of, just give it some room. I mean, that may actually, drive up the cost for somebody. Somebody may only want 100%. But I think giving the flexibility is important. I mean, if someone's going to be environmentally, conscious, and I think we kind of owe it to them to do that. Thank you very much. So we will change that from 100% to 125%. Excellent. Okay. Are there any other concerns regarding this this amendment? Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up or talk about?
Councilor Hurst again. I'd really like to hear what the public has to say. The council has talked quite a bit on it. The public, and not as much as us. And when we vote on the final product, how we vote, then we can talk. I'd really like to hear what the public is. I think the public definitely has a lot of opinions and views, I'm sure, and I think it's best for us to listen. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, with that being said, I don't see any other comments from any of the counselors. I'm going to open this up to the public. So I'm going to call on you as your hand was raised and in the order that it was raised. Joe, please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Joe Moreau, Old Depot Road. Good evening to everyone. I have listened from start to finish concerning this proposal. I always research for information regarding any project or proposals. I reviewed the minutes of the meeting from December 14th, 2020, and on page 3, it stated that Mrs. Sulko called in remotely and explained that their intent was to improve the town and maintain the beauty of the area. I certainly agree with that. Attorney Squirts noted that his clients became concerned with the solar issues in town because they are abutters to several proposed large projects. I understand that point also after the attempt to install a large solar project across from our home. I wish that the Attorney Squirt's clients were involved sooner to help stop the attempt to change RFR 80 to special commercial for solar in our town. I believe the PSES ordinance dated January 22nd, 2019 needed a few changes and tweaks, but not a major redo. Two changes I have mentioned are a defined work schedule, and our town needs to be notified when a solar project is generating power. At this point, no one is notified in our town or our town offices. Our tax assessor has gone out on New Year's Eve to a project to see if she could hear it generating power. That is dedicated an employee. We need to ensure that our town is receiving the correct revenues on all projects. I was speaking with someone a couple of weeks ago, and I was asked if I knew who the Skolkos were. I said, I know they own some land off Woodville Road that abuts a failed attempt to rezone property for solar. I also said that it abuts the proposed Stone Ridge solar project. I was told by this person that the Skolkos are real estate developers. In my opening statement, I discussed about the research I do on all projects and proposals. I review all the facts needed to be discussed. I had no intentions of reviewing the Secretary of State's website until I received that information. At that point, I had Googled Thomas Skolko. What I found on the entity results under a Thomas P. Skolko is listed as the manager, and there's two addresses. One is 122 East 95th Street. The other address is 132 East 95th Street. And there are 4 LLCs, one at 59 Watch Hill Road, one at 75 Watch Hill Road, one at Babcock Cove, and one at Wilcox. On the paperwork submitted to our town that was date stamped October 6th, 2020, the name was listed as Tom and Cynthia Skolko. The addresses were the 192 Woodville Road and the 132 East 95th Street. I believe that residents need to do what they have to protect their assets, which is done many times. I also found out that Thomas P. Skolko and Cynthia Skolko have been on several different boards, commissions, fundraisers, etc. They also have their own foundation to help those in need. Thomas has a medical facility named after him. They are truly trying to help out their community. As I said before, all of the facts need to be discussed. I found out tonight that the Skolkos have donated to the Westerly school system in the past. I need to clarify a couple of points. I was told in an email on January 20th, 21st, and I quote, I heard you lash out again at those troublesome New Yorkers, end quote. I was also told in that same email, and I quote, I was denigrating the people who had the financial wherewithal to help us fight to preserve the rural character of the town, end quote. I have not lashed out at anyone, and I would not denigrate anyone, especially the Skulkos. That's not my style. I have one suggestion for the attorney and the Skulkos. Please do your own research to ensure that you have an accurate information of all the facts. In closing, the PSES ordinance is a small part of our town. Our council and town staff still have a town to run. Some individuals get hung up on one particular part of the town and do not look at the entire picture. We need to move forward, and let's not get hung up on one ordinance. We have residents who are having a difficult time paying their bills and putting food on their table. Let's all work together on different issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Next up, Jim Lampier, I see your hands up. Did you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. President. I just wanted to revisit that use code number 309 again. And in light of the change that you're recommending, putting an S in under manufacturing, you're going to have to change the ends in the primary and the secondary. And I would suggest that you put P's there. You have two options. You can either put A there for both of them, and that would mean that they'd have to get an aquifer protection permit along with the special use permit, or you can change those to two Ps, such that they don't need the aquifer protection permit. So that's up to you to make that choice. But we can't go forward with this with the two ends there, because that means it's not allowed.
Okay. Thank you very much for that input. With that being said, we'll back up just a minute here and discuss that.
Mr. President,
So,
Councilor Gary.
By adding A's, that's going to, I mean, obviously. Yes, go ahead, Councilor Gary.
Yeah, Councilor, President Moffett, Councilor Gary, I concur with the town planner.
Bob, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, Bob Marvel here. I just wanted to comment on something.
Yes, Councilor Marvel.
Yeah, so I think we talked about this when we were discussing the contaminated sites before. My feeling is that even though it requires more expense and so forth, I think the aquifer protection overlays should be an A. They should be getting review and scrutiny, because you know this is an aquifer situation that we've got to protect our aquifers, and I think particularly on top of contaminated soil, I think it's a lot more important.
Councilor Moffett here. I 100% agree with Councilor Marvel and Councilor Geary. I'm not sure if Sharon had anything she wanted to add to that, or just to let us know that she's in agreement.
Councilor Davis, I am in agreement to put A's.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure you are too, Scott, based on your.
Yes, I mean, the town planner knows the rules as far as what's contradictory.
Absolutely.
We do these rules, so I have confidence in Jim Lampier setting us straight on those type of procedural type things.
Okay, thank you. So noted. So we will also move in the aquifer primary and overlay secondary. We will change the ends to A's. Okay, thank you. All right. Jim, did you have anything else to add? Your hand's still up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can. I'm not sure I know how to take it down, my hand down, but I think I'm fine.
Just checking, that's all. All right, next up is Chip.
Hi, this is Chip Hale, Chip Hale from Chase Hill Road, Ashaway. A couple things. First, with regard to the statement that Mr. Moreau just made, I'm not sure. I don't know why it's actually relevant who proposes any changes to an ordinance. because this is not, I think we've all seen over the last several months of working through this, that all they actually did was present a foundation or the suggestion. They actually put the effort in to get this process initiated. And I appreciate that Councillor Hurst was willing to propose it. Beyond that, certainly we've been working off stuff that the Skolkos and their lawyer have presented, but I actually like the idea that this is a town revision. And if anyone disagrees with that, then what are we all doing on these workshops? Why have we all spent many, many hours talking about what's best for this town? So it's actually completely irrelevant who proposes these potential changes to ordinances. I mean, as long as they own property in this town, I mean, really, because I've only been here for 4 or 5 years, am I now not allowed to propose changes to the ordinance? That's the implication. And frankly, that's pretty frustrating, especially when there's communication going back and forth where people are actually, you know, outside of these trying to work together to find a reasonable and amenable ordinance that works to the best of the town's and the residents, circumstances. So I'm a little bit frustrated with those comments.
Councillor Hurst, I would just like to comment that we all have to work together. I was glad to sponsor it without a commitment of voting for it, because I believe everybody procedurally needed a council person to bring it forward. And I believe that council people have a responsibility to make government user-friendly as much as possible. The specific problem is with politics and government is the fact that we don't have a level playing field. We all might have one vote, but not everybody can hire lawyers or different experts in different fields and come up with an ordinance. So the Skolkos did have that advantage. But nonetheless, and I sponsored it, and the fact I sponsored it speaks for itself. So it could be put before the council, but not everybody has the same amount of time, the same type of financial resources to get experts in legal counsel to come up with a product. And that's all. I just want to make that observation with no criticism to the fact that they did that. It's just a reality. Not everybody has the same financial wherewithal to do such things. Thank you.
I completely understand your point, but my point is at this stage, I'm grateful and the Skolkos are fortunate that they have these resources. I think we should, as a town, should be grateful that private citizens are actually willing to put their resources towards trying to improve this town. We need to keep in mind that what the Skolkos and their lawyer presented is not the final product here. All they did was suggest changes, which presented discussion points that this town council and the community members that have participated in these workshops have then had very detailed discussions about. And as far as I'm concerned, and no, this is no offense to the Skolkos or their lawyer, this is no longer their ordinance. This is a town ordinance that we're all discussing as a town with you as our representatives who ultimately have the vote on how this is adopted. This is exactly how this is supposed to work. We should be loving this. This is exactly the process that we should be following. The point is at this stage, especially months and weeks into this, why are we still even discussing the quote unquote qualifications of the people that presented a change to an ordinance? And I'm sorry, Joe, if this, I don't mean to be insulting or anything, but I'm a little disappointed in the tone of your comments. I want to stop there because I don't want to make this about that. I'd like to move on. My next point is with respect to the change with the contaminated sites. As at least the town council knows, I don't know if the residents know or not, I wrote an email with an opinion, an opinion on how these should be treated. That opinion was based as my experience as I have a PhD in oceanography. My research centered in geology, and I actually spent a significant amount of my time understanding terrestrial geology and how water moves through a system. That's just to give some context for why my opinion might even matter. Whether it does or not, that's not up to me. The point was, when we really need to understand these aquifers, the designations that have been made versus primary and secondary aquifers. When you look at, and this isn't great, but at the town level, the primary and secondary have very little definition behind why they were chosen. So what I did was I actually looked at the state level, at the DEM maps, and the DEM maps actually designate there's a very clear distinction between what we consider primary and secondary in this town. And the primary aquifers, are the primary protection zones, are actually those where our aquifers, they're actually groundwater reservoirs or groundwater recharge zones. The secondary ones are unclear as to what, they're not necessarily recharge or reservoirs, but the A actually means that there is drinkable and usable water in those zones. It's just not entirely clear where exactly that water is coming from. In the email that I sent, I made the point that if we are looking at, now the problem becomes that our whole town is characterized as a primary or secondary aquifer protection zone. So I realized the hesitancy to say, well, we have to exclude, we put an N in both the secondary and primary, right? Because that means if we do that, there's no solar development in this town. And in fact, the response might be, there's no development in this town. I'm not saying that that's what we need to go. That's very extreme. What I am suggesting is that I would really argue that we keep an N in that primary protection zone, because we know that DEM knows that those are groundwater reservoirs and groundwater recharge zones, which means that that groundwater is being recharged. The recharge mechanism for those areas are for surface percolation and things like that. That surface percolation means that if that water is actually percolating through contaminated areas, it can likely carry contaminated chemicals, anything that's in that contaminated zone. In my email to the town council, I actually said, like, I said, I don't think we should develop in that zone. If we consider the secondary zones as a possibility, I'd be open to that, but we need to set some really strict standards on some criteria for why or why not we develop in those zones. If it's very close to one of these primary zones, we might want to say no, because these zones as they are defined are not exact, right? I mean, if this isn't someone that's gone out every centimeter and measured out these zones, they've measured, miles, hundreds of yards apart or something like that. My point is, I would be willing to accept an A or I don't know what to designate, like in the secondary protection zones, I'd be willing to at least consider it, but we need to make the potential development, the characterization of that zone very stringent to ensure that it doesn't actually impact our groundwater and aquifers. But I would say any of these zones that are primary protection zones, we should stay clear of. One of the biggest issues in our town is balancing this budget, balancing our town budget, and not increasing the tax rate. If we contaminate our groundwater resources in this town, not only is this town going to have to, or the residents going to have to pay for municipal infrastructure to provide our water, we're all gonna have to pay to have our houses connected to that municipal infrastructure. And then we're gonna be paying a water bill in perpetuity. Is that really what we wanna do? I can't, I mean, really, we shouldn't even wanna risk contaminating those primary reservoirs and recharge zones. It's without knowing exactly the circumstances to a town like this that is already struggling to meet its financial obligations, it is potential suicide. So that's all I have to say about that.
Steve, this is
Steve?
Bob Marvel. I wanted to make a comment on that.
Sure, go ahead.
So the last time in the workshop, we were discussing the contaminated
I'm
site.
sorry, who's speaking? Who's
This is
speaking right
Bob.
now?
This is Counselor Bob Marvel.
Thank you.
Okay. So when we discussed this in the workshop, the discussion was very similar, and I believe that is why we came to the conclusion that for now, we should put ends across the board for contaminated site and consider, studying it further later on. And I know that earlier on, we were changing our minds on the manufacturing zone, but I still feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. I would rather go back to the approach that we were going to take earlier and just disallow it across the board and then consider it later on, having a more detailed discussion. That's all I wanted to say.
Steve, this is Sharon Davis. Can I answer that?
Yes, go ahead, Sharon. Just state your name
Okay.
for the court reporter, please.
Sharon Davis, counselor. When I went on the RIDEM website, there were only 9 contaminated sites in Hopkinton. 4 of them have been remediated. 2 of them are the 2 of the remediated ones are zoned manufacturing. So we really, our exposure is a whole lot less than we thought. And so I think when we define the contaminated sites to make sure that they were judged that way by RIDEM, it's not somebody who's going to spill a little oil in his backyard and then say, oh, now I have a contaminated site. No. I'm talking about the sites that were on the RIDEM website. There were only 9 projects in Hopkinton. 4 of them have been remediated even. And so, and the others are really small. So I think that we will be safe in going forward with only somewhat allowing it in manufacturing zones. That's why I sent you the list of projects in Hopkinton.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon. This is Counselor Moffett. I'm just going to comment that, to kind of reflect what Counselor Davis said about the existing sites. Obviously we have, some sites that we know of. I don't think by adding this special use permit and adding the A to get the aquifer permits, it's going to add extra scrutiny to it. I really think it's going to get the scrutiny that it needs during that process. It's going to open the door for that scrutiny. And I mean, if it's not feasible and it's not right, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's going to be experts in it. It's not like this is going to get thrown to the door and they're going to be able to do whatever they want to do. I mean, any developer that would come in and do anything on a contaminated site would be shooting themselves in the foot by doing anything that was against what needed to be done. So that's why I am in agreement with I'm in agreement with Counselor Davis. So and that's where I stand.
Mr. Council President,
Yes, sir.
If I could make a suggestion on that point, Councilor Davis mentioned that there's a limited, a number of contaminated sites currently designated by DEM. Would you like it if I added into the definition of contaminated site that it would have to be designated as a contaminated site by, just throwing it out there by like today's date, by February 16th, 2020?
That's fine.
That'd be excellent.
Okay, I can work that into the definition.
Yes, I would absolutely like that language added to it. That would be great.
So Bob Marvel here, just a question. Sharon, do you happen to know how many of these 9 or 10 projects are sitting on top of a primary aquifer?
Well, it sounds, that part I don't know. I've given a list to Jim Lanfear. He could probably get that information between now and the next time we meet. Right, Jim?
Yes, Jim Lanfear, Town Planner. Yes, I would concur with much of what you said, Councilor Davis. So basically, I just want to say that by putting the S in manufacturing, the amount of exposure we currently have is so minuscule. There's 2 manufacturing sites currently that are contaminated and zone manufacturing, and possibly a third, one of the Grills properties that I believe is owned by the Hopkinton Land Trust at the present time might have a little bit of contamination on one of those parcels. But anyway, so that's basically what you're opening yourself up to right there. It's not like you're opening the floodgates to anything. I'll venture to say I was going to ask the council if you would consider putting an S in RFR 80 as well, but I chose not to bring that up because I just didn't see the inclination there. So I was content leaving well enough alone and accepting an S in manufacturing along with the 2 A's. You really there is no, in all honesty, I don't see any need to put an N in the primary protection zone. First of all, DEM is going to approve a solar array on top of a contaminated, closed-out site to begin with. So you know when you're quoting the DEM is going to be the sole approver of this. First of all, the DEM is going to have to step in and ensure that a contaminated site is closed out properly according to DEM regulations. And then after it's closed out properly, the DEM is only going to approve a solar design that works on that site. So I mean, you're going to have DEM involved in these things every step of the way. The DEM is not going to approve a solar array anywhere where it's going to affect the aquifer, and I haven't seen any evidence in all the solar projects that I've gone through. I haven't seen any credible evidence that these solar panels adversely affect the aquifer, and particularly with respect to a contaminated site which has been capped with a membrane. You're not allowed to puncture this membrane. If you're going to put solar panels on top of a landfill site, it's all going to be a ballasted, weighted system. There's going to be no protrusions into the cap. That defeats the whole purpose of closing the site out. So I don't see the cause of alarm there and the need to prohibit this from the primary zones. I just don't see it. So I think I'm content. Basically, I think we can work with. I think the town can do what it needs to get done, having an S in the manufacturing and 2 A's in the primary and secondary. I think we can work with that. That's a safe approach.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Any councilors have any comments to that? Okay, not hearing any, I will move on to the next hand that is raised. If your phone number is 539-2294, please state your name for the record.
Hi, it's Mimi. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mary Carlson, for the record. You all got my letter about opposing a special use permit for residential ground-mounted solar. Did everybody read it?
Yes.
Okay. Why, my question is, if I wanted to convert my fuel oil hot air furnace to an electric furnace and use ground-mounted solar behind my barn, why am I only limited to what my present electric bill is, or 125% of that? Because obviously, since I burn in excess of $4,000 worth of oil a year, and I'd like to totally stop that by putting in an electric furnace with ground-mounted solar, why am I limited only to 125% of supposed electric bill?
This is Counselor Moffett. To answer that, I wanted to add ground-mounted solar to allow residents to have the option to have ground-mounted residential accessory solar. I did not want to completely not allow that. I felt there were potential situations where it may be necessary to have that. My thought is,
I have 5.5 acres. I
Go
have
ahead.
only one neighbor that could possibly see this over a 4-foot stone wall. But in order to take away my oil furnace and put it in an electric, I'm going to need a lot more than 125% of my present electric bill in terms of solar generation. I want to get rid of fossil fuels from my entire property, but you're not going to allow that.
This is Bob Marvel. Can I comment on that, Steve?
yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
I think the intent in the definition, although it may not be stated correctly, is that the ground-mounted solar would provide up to 125% of your energy needs for your property. Not necessarily.
Can we put a parenthetical electric and fuel oil combined, or something that says it's not merely my electric bill? You know, 42 years working as a professional EPA, both scientist and program manager, I really want to get off fossil fuels.
So the definition of accessory solar, as I read it here, it says that ground-mounted generates no more energy than 125% of the energy that is necessary to support the principal use of the parcel on which the solar system is located. So that's talking about not necessarily just electric or fuel, it's talking about energy. So,
well, can we at least put some kind of definition there that says it's the combined of the two? Because I'm afraid somewhere down the line, a building inspector or whatever is going to cause, necessity to hire massive lawyers and whatever. I'm 76 years old. I don't know how much fight I have left in me, but I really would like to convert this house before I die. It's on the historic national inventory of historic places. It's poured concrete 4 stories high, and it's built within a year of Portland cement being imported to this country. So it's Antoinette Downing did the documentation, but I'd like to have it as energy efficient as possible.
This is
Steve,
Counselor
this is
Moffett.
Sharon.
I would also, yes, go ahead, Sharon. You can go first. Go ahead.
I was just going to, where that word says energy, in that last line, 125% of the energy, you could put in parentheses, electric, propane, whatever. You could make that. Just put
like
that
combination of.
Yeah. That is necessary to support the principal use.
So this is Counselor Moffett. So for instance, so you want to convert oil to electricity. Is that what you're saying? Is that the scenario you are presenting?
Yes, and I'll probably need about a half acre of my old garden and orchard. I have 5.5, acres of property. If you look at the property, it's, it goes way back behind my barn,
Yeah,
and there's an old garden and orchard.
well,
No one can see it but the Andersons. Everything else is woods all around.
I mean, I would suggest, and this is, I mean, again, this is an ordinance, this is for the town, this is to do whatever. If I hadn't brought up the ground mounted, we may not even be talking about any accessory ground mounted solar.
Well, I'd sue you if you didn't allow it, frankly.
And I mean, I
because
understand your
I'm an
arguments,
environmentalist, and
but-
it's required.
Mr. Council President, if I could make a suggestion.
Just state your name for the record, Peter, so the
I apologize, Peter Scores on behalf of the applicant. I think Councilman Marvel brought up that, it does say energy in the definition, and I think just for clarification purposes, I could add in language suggested by Councilor Davis to where it says no more than 100%, 125% of the energy, and then just put in parentheses, e.g. electric, oil, propane, etc. And then
Yes.
parenthesis that is necessary to support the principal use of the parcel on which the solar energy system is located.
And just for more input, if I, because this is an extremely important historic home, and I think that the Historical Society is contemplating putting Hope Valley into a district like, Hopkinton City. It's really important that solar does not go on any of my roofs. That will negate any possible historic designation. So I have to put it on the ground, and I'm perfectly willing to put screening, even opaque fencing, as long as critters can get underneath it.
So this is Councilor Moffett again, and I.
What?
And I kind of did hear you say you're assuming you would need a half acre of land to put ground mounted solar on, and that would, I mean, a half acre, you're talking 20 feet.
I
Right,
have
but,
no idea,
I mean,
and, whoops.
I mean, a half acre of solar, I mean, that's for a residential use or an accessory use would be, I mean, it would just be extreme. I mean, that's just not what.
I have no idea what I need, but if I burn 4,000 to 5,000 gallons worth of oil, and my electric bill is like $250 a month, what do you think I will need for? I'd be waiting to hear from National Grid.
Right.
But they're on me all the time to reduce my energy consumption. But a concrete house with no insulation consumes for people in their late 70s.
Right. And so have you done the research? I mean, if you were talking about switching over from fuel oil to electricity, heat wise, I mean, do you have a ballpark what that system's going to cost?
No, because I've been waiting for you to permit it.
Right. Well, we're saying here, I mean,
A half
it's going to be
acre of solar is
125% of your electrical needs. It's
more than electrical needs. It's electric combined with my oil.
Understood. But what I am saying is I am sure that you could, whoever's going to do that type of installation or service would be more than happy to quote you on a cost of the system and give you the information as to how much electricity that you would be requiring to use. I mean, you would have to do that research. Nobody would buy
but I don't.
without knowing how much.
I just want a town ordinance that permits me to put in a half acre if I need it. It'll be totally surrounded by fence, opaque fence if necessary. So, all these people that have been told to put trees around, the trees are going to take 30 years to grow around them.
I am, well, this is Councilor Moffett again. 125% is that's where I'm stopping at. And that's.
As long as you're combining the uses,
at some point
that's fine.
it is going to end up. So what do you say? So you're saying, and I'm just talking on a scenario here. And it's, so you're saying you would potentially have a system that uses oil and electricity? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I want to get rid of all fossil fuels on my property
Okay,
and go totally electric. And if I have to put a series of batteries in a
okay, so what I'm
basement or an
saying is,
outbuilding, that's fine.
if you're, if, right, and I agree, but if you're so passionate about doing this, I just, I mean, these companies will do these estimates for nothing. I mean, I just think that, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of,
Just allow me in the ordinance without having to come before you for a special use permit when I've got 5.5 acres and I have a historic home that can't do this ugly roof mounting.
and again, that is why I proposed to allow ground mounted solar with a special use, so it wasn't littered all over the town. We had guidelines and we had specific situations where you could and could not have it. I mean, I'm gonna stand firm on that. That's how I,
Why should, look, you've got a town of, you know, working class people and middle income people. And you're going to make them have to hire a lawyer, hire an engineer, hire a surveyor, and you know that alone makes it prohibitive. If you wrote the ordinance with enough restrictions and setbacks and coverage so that the building inspector could run this, you wouldn't require all those professionals. You're making, you know, this possibility of converting to all electric and getting rid of fossil fuels impossible for most of the residents of this town and their income levels. Please understand, you're imposing yuppie, uppity regulations
I understand
for
what you're
a
saying.
town
Also, I
that's
want to point your attention.
simple residents. Why are we pretending that we're in Papasquash Point or Watch Hill? We are not. We're in a working class town, and that's onerous and prohibitive to do that sort of thing. As long as somebody combines with setbacks and screening, you shouldn't be any more prescriptive than that.
Bob Marvel, can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Marble.
So I think that we're kind of getting in the weeds on this, and I think that my only comment on this with regard to accessory ground-mounted solar is we are taking the best approach that we can that's going to protect the entire town with regard to solar sprawl that we've seen in the past few years. I think that a special use permit, while it is maybe puts a little difficulty on the people asking for it, I think that it is probably the best way we have right now to ensure that the town as a whole is protected. And I would not be comfortable changing that to just a permitted use for ground mounted solar in RFR 80.
Councilor
And this is
Hurst.
Councilor Moffett.
Okay.
I would like to add one thing to it. In the ordinance as it's proposed, there is estimated use of a new system. So if your intent, I mean, if we're going to allow 125%, if you went out and found out that, you know, it's going to take X amount of, you know, square feet of ground mounted solar for your particular system, because you're going to go out and you're going to be 100% solar on your house, the heat, electricity, charging station for your car, if that's how you have it, then it's written in there that there's an estimated size. So we're giving you 125% of your potential. So I feel as if you can go out, get the estimate, find out what it's going to cost you to do it, and you're going to be allowed 125%. So that's all that I have to say about it. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. I do appreciate you, you know, Step it
But
up.
you're still gonna require me to get a lawyer, a surveyor, and an
Talking
engineer.
about it.
Counselor Hurst, if I could speak, first of all, Mrs. Carlson is long been a community activist. And I would say, just for the record and for people that don't know, she's a product, like myself, of the political science program at the University of Rhode Island. And also she has worked for the EPA, so her environmental credentials speak for themselves. I may not agree with her in the end, but she does have a perspective, and a thoughtful one, that should be reflected on. Thank you.
I was also a union president and member for 28 years in the federal government. And I understand when you're putting onerous requirements on little people. And I really resent it. And I have more resources than most. But if you do this and always require a special use permit, you're just feeding the lawyers and the engineers and hurting your residents. And they've been loyal taxpayers for years. And I just caution you that we don't live in Watch Hill or Papa Squash Point. We are working class, middle class people, and having all these special use permits that require all the engineering and professional input and a lawyer on top of it is outrageous. You have no faith in your own building inspector.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the next hand that is raised up. And I see its name is Scott Milnes. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name right, but you have the floor. Please state your name for the record.
Scott Mellons, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I just have one question about the new proposed ordinance. How will this ordinance affect the Farm Viability Act that is currently in place? Because it doesn't mention it within this new ordinance. That's my first question. I don't know if we can answer that first. I actually have two questions.
Peter, would you be able to answer that?
I could answer that. Thank you, Mr. Council President. This is Peter Scores on behalf of the applicants. Our original draft did include some changes to the farm viability ordinance. I took that out of some subsequent drafts based on comment received from the council. So this current draft does not include any changes to the farm viability.
So the Farm Viability Act will still be in place?
One second.
Yeah, the draft they have in front of them wouldn't change it. So if the council wanted to make changes, I could draft something, but what you have in front of you now doesn't change it.
So,
okay. And then my second question, go ahead. Sorry.
You can go ahead with your second question, and this is Councilor Moffett. Just
okay. Yep. I had a question with section 5.3, 5.3.1, part B. This current ordinance goes in effect upon passage, and B says accessory solar energy systems of which a building permit application has been submitted prior to the enactment of the section shall not be subject to the requirement found herein. I would assume that any projects that are in the process or have a building permit application in place prior to this enactment would still, it wouldn't affect any permits, not just accessory use energy systems, or am I reading it wrong or the intent of it wrong?
Mr. Council President, I could answer that question if you like.
please do. Can you just repeat what section of the ordinance, of the proposed ordinance?
Sure. I believe this is
Section what, 5 what?
It's 5.3.1B, I believe the gentleman was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Yep, then go ahead and explain, please.
So I could, I'll defer to your solicitor if he disagrees with anything that I'm saying, but there are provisions that exist under state law and that are already in the zoning ordinance that provide if you have a completed application submitted either before the planning board or before the zoning board, or if you apply for a building permit, that you're vested under the ordinance that existed prior to the change. And so that language that you've pointed to is just intended for clarification. It only says accessory at this draft. And I believe that's because the last time around, only accessory was going to be allowed under this ordinance. You've since expanded that to include the contaminated site, but that would be a new use code that previously wasn't contemplated by your ordinance. So that's just intended for clarification purposes.
Okay. So existing that are in the system or are in that permitting stage would be allowed by the state law to stay under the current ordinance, correct?
If they had a complete application, well, this is the applicant's attorney speaking.
Yes, yes.
But, my understanding is that, or my position would be that state law requires, and your zoning ordinance already has a provision that if you've submitted a complete application to the appropriate permitting authority, whether it's the zoning board, the planning board, or if it just requires a building permit, you file for the building permit application. If it's complete, the permitting authority recognizes it as complete, you're vested under the prior ordinance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Peter, or Attorney Squares, this is Counselor Moffett. I just have one question here in regards to his farm viability ordinance part that he asked. I'm looking at the chapter 247, where it says farm-based photovoltaic energy system, and then it says in section A, intermediate and large farms as defined herein may install PSES as an accessory use that meets the following requirements. Now, in our current in the proposed ordinance here, we have PSES stricken from the definitions. And also it says as an accessory. I don't see any language in here that says it is, you know what I mean? So how would that affect this ordinance? By us changing the ordinance that we have drafted here, I mean, does that language carry over into this section?
So you raise a good point. And I think what the council would need to do is, one, you'd have to take the PSES out of the farm viability ordinance and use consistent language and call it a solar energy system, which is what we've have in this draft. The only other change is that I think you'd want to put a line clarifying either in the farm viability ordinance or in the in this draft you have before you, whether or not the requirements for accessory solar carry over to the farm viability ordinance, because that hasn't been addressed in the draft I put in front of you. I just took out any proposed changes to the farm viability ordinance. But I think to make it clear, if you wanted to clarify the point, just putting in a line saying, either these requirements for accessory stated in this draft do not apply to the farm viability ordinance, or that they do, and that way it wouldn't be open-ended for a developer or an abutter to argue over it in the future if you just put a line in. But that right now, that's subject to interpretation.
I'm sorry, you broke up there.
Did I break up?
Or maybe you just finished what you were saying. I'm sorry, it kind of broke up at the end there. So I'm just going to reiterate to you. So by adding something to our draft ordinance, a line stating that the PSES and the farm viability would have to meet a certain requirement, or that? You what I'm
Yeah,
getting?
yeah, I think if that's the direction the council wanted to go, just say that the requirements of this section apply to the farm viability ordinance. Or if you wanted to go the other direction, you could say the requirements of this section do not apply to the farm viability ordinance. But either way, direction from the council on that point, and adding a line to that point would clarify the issue.
Okay. All right. Do, I'm trying to think here. Move on to this. All right, I'm gonna go to the next hand raised here real quick. I think it is Eric. Eric, go ahead. Eric, just state your name for the record, please.
Hi, it's Eric Bibler on Woodville Road. We're kind of jumping around here. I just wanted to make a suggestion that, maybe we want to take a section at a time and then have public comment that pertains to that section. I actually wanted to comment on and ask a few questions on this issue of contaminated sites, which, was quite some time ago that you discussed it. But I guess I'm confused because we're trying to write regulations that will protect us for contaminated sites. I thought the way it was left at the last meeting was that this is something that might require some further study. And I don't know what happened in between the meetings, but I also don't understand why the rush. I mean, I thought the consensus was that we could take this as a separate issue, and add it back into the ordinance in June or something like, starting in June when you get past the budget process. But I don't understand the sense of urgency in settling this on, imperfect information now. And then to the comment of, the number of contaminated sites that we have, and that our exposure is minimal. It only takes one, to cause a problem. It was mentioned that Sharon had sent out a list of sites. We're a bit disadvantaged members of the public in terms of trying to absorb that information because we don't have it, and this is a public hearing. So I would hope that this information would be provided, if this hearing is continued. Also the idea of not having risk because we're limiting it to manufacturing sites, and there are only two of them. As we know from the last 13 proposals for commercial solar development in the RFR 80 zone, not having the proper zoning to do a solar project in Hopkinton has never been an impediment in the past. Just depends on who's on the town council. And we've had, multiple petitions for 13 petitions, really 15 petitions that for zone changes that I think it's 15, maybe it's 13. And every one of them has been entertained. So that's one thing. I would feel more comfortable if we would take this as a separate issue. And I'm not sure I want to get into it right now. I want to wait till the town council is ready, but I think every single workshop meeting I've been at, the discussion about farm viability has basically been deferred. I mean, the pros and cons of the 2016 ordinance, I think it's chapter 247. We've never debated those. The counselors know that I've written to you, a couple of times. I really see this as a very problematic ordinance, and I, really having nothing to do with wanting to do anything for farmers. I just find that it really fails the test of accomplishing the objectives that everybody ascribes to it. First of all, you only need 1 year of farm income to qualify. You don't have any commitment to continue farming.
Yeah.
You can earn $70,000 up front, on a 1 acre solar project, and $10,000 a year if you qualify with $2,500 of income from, selling a few cords of firewood. And then there's no there's no test or anything for hardship. So this whole idea of the two words in the ordinance are farm and viability, and it doesn't relate to any farming activity. It doesn't require that you be a farmer for more than a year. And it doesn't require that you do anything to make you viable as a farmer. It's just purely an entitlement. But lastly, the way this draft of the ordinance is written, as of the last meeting, I guess the council was going to prohibit large-scale solar arrays, large-scale solar systems in every zone except for the residential zone. The only place you could have a large-scale solar system was in the RFR 80 zone, and you had to be a farmer. And you could do anywhere from 1 to 3 acres. But what we stripped out of the ordinance in this draft is everything from the old PSES and everything from the proposed new ordinance that would regulate the installation of a 3-acre solar farm. So gone are the setbacks and the buffers and the drainage plans and the everything, the decommissioning reserves, requiring an estimate and a reserve based upon recycling. So, I mean, I propose to the council, and I still think it's a good idea. I think these two issues are complicated. I'm in favor of trying to find a farm viability ordinance that actually gets the job done. I think the one from 2016, not the farm viability ordinance from 2003, which has total integrity. I'm talking about the add-on for solar in 2016. I'm in favor of trying to find something that works. I think the existing one is an invitation to trouble. I'd love to see councilors Geary and Hurst, who are strong proponents, go away and try to improve, what we're trying to do here and propose a replacement. So I think the thing to do is for now to make building on contaminated sites prohibited use, because I don't see the urgency. And I would also repeal the 2016 ordinance, chapter 247, but fully commit on the town council to take these subjects up in June or September or something like that, and try to propose regulations that are more suitable. That gets you passed also. If you do that, if you just prohibit those uses, then you also have time to figure out what needs to be added back into the ordinance to regulate contaminated sites correctly, and what needs to be added back into the ordinance to regulate sites on farms. But right now we have neither, and I think we're just going to end up chasing our tails for several more meetings in the middle of budget season, trying to get that done. I think it's going to be really hard to do. Anyway, thanks for giving me time to speak.
Eric. Up next, if the last 4 digits of your number are 0977, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record, please.
Hi, this is Luann McCormick. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hi, Luann McCormick, Lisa Lane in Hope Valley. And first of all, I just want to say again how grateful I am for you guys spending, your hours and hours on trying to, hammer this issue out. As I've mentioned before, this really came to a head right when my husband and I moved here in 2016, and it's been like watching, an oncoming freight train. As all of the solar development, solar sprawl, has hit this town. And I understand, one of the speakers earlier said that, the town has other business, and I totally get that. But I think that, that if you're one of the ones that has the freight train coming at you, then this is the most critical thing. This issue is the most critical thing. And, what I'm hearing I think the Skolkos have just done an amazing public service for our, just in getting us, to bring this back up, to hash it out, because obviously there are problems, that have been borne out through, through boots on the ground, watching what's actually happening with these ordinances and with the developers, and how it actually, fleshes out in real time. And quite frankly, I've been horrified, and I know a lot of other people have too. So, when I hear, the ground-mounted solar and the questions about the farm viability, I just think to myself, for anything like that, just like any other part of the, the ordinance, I feel like the best possible thing that can be done is to think in terms of how to plug the holes. How do you plug the holes? And I know that there's never going to be a way to 100% get that right, but it's like you've got to think about, when you think about the amount of pressure that this town is under from solar developers, whether it is, wanting to get stuff on ground mounted in people's, backyards, whether it is, the farm viability and it being such a lucrative way of doing things. I'm absolutely blown away that it only takes 1 year of farming in order to be able to put solar on your property. I mean, for God's sakes, you've got to live here for a minimum of 5 years if you're a senior citizen to get a tax break. I mean, how does that make sense? It seems like there's an awful lot of inequity with the way that this has been applied, all the way, just all the way, down the line. This thing about the aquifers, I mean, when you look at how, and again, it's how much pressure there is coming from these solar developers to figure out a way. Okay, if we can't do it this way, then let's do it that way. Well, if it doesn't do this way, maybe we can push it that way. Oh, well, you know what? Maybe we'll just, ask for a rezone. Well, maybe we can go ahead and put it on, 15 farms. I mean, from what you've seen, that pressure will continue. So the idea is, how do we protect our town? And I'm just so very grateful for you putting in, the effort to, to try to plug those holes. And, the other thing is, and this is the last thing I'll say, is I want to do a shout out. I know it's early for this, but I'm not going to be on at the very end of this call. I want to put a shout out to Cliff Heil and Steve Wheel, who are going to be up for a couple of boards and positions. And I just want to say, those guys would just be rock stars or whatever they do. So, big thumbs up to them for them getting on boards and taking positions that they want. Anyway, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Luann. Up next, if your phone number ends in 9593, please state your name for the record.
Hi, Carolyn Light here, 43 Forest Glen Drive. How are you guys tonight?
Good, yourself.
Great. Great job. You guys are doing a great job. I've been listening and I have a couple of comments, and I've got this really messy list in front of me, so bear with me if I bounce around. My first comment is goes back to the contaminated sites. So first, I'd like to applaud you for reconsidering your position on that. I think that's excellent. I think the only way to get closer to the unknowns that were mentioned is to have the opportunity to have that. If DEM has identified sites, great. Those sound like targets for Hopkinton, and hopefully we'll have those property owners interested in mitigating the damage that's done to the land. I want to bring to your attention the fact that Hopkinton could have sites that have not yet been identified by DEM. I don't think we have property owners raising their hand saying, call me contaminated. I don't think you should close the window to that. And this goes back to Mr. Squirts' recommendation that the ordinance read contaminated sites identified by DEM as of this particular date. So I caution you that with a recent project that came to light in town, nobody had identified a site as a contaminated site located very close to the Pawcatuck River. If they didn't have interest in putting up a solar farm, the potential to have the land mitigated would not exist. So ponder that, and that's my point there. I want to go back to something Chip said. I agree with the contaminated site designating, what were we talking about? An A for manufacturing, in S, no, it was an S for manufacturing with an AA. I can't recall wherever we're at over there. I think anything that could potentially be landed on a primary aquifer site should get a thumbs up from the appropriate authorities. If somebody is interested in cleaning up a contaminated site next to a natural resource that has been identified by Hopkinton, neighbors, or the national registers as valuable, we should offer them the opportunity they need to clean up the land. I would also offer that with the concerns that Chip brought up. Maybe there could be a pro-con to it. Maybe another expert can be brought in to say, this is the value of putting up a solar project. These are the contaminants or potential damage you can expect versus leaving the contaminated land as is. Contaminated land, and hair went up on the back of my neck when he was talking about the air percolating through the land to the surface. When we're talking about contaminations, we're talking about chemicals being released into the land, into the air that the neighboring community is ingesting. So I'd rather see an attempt to clean those up and put a solar project up that is going to lend less contamination to the area and protect the habitat, et cetera. So I'm all for it. I agree with him. We need to make sure that the primary aquifers are protected. I heard a comment about the farm viability and that only 1 year of farming income is required to establish an interest in putting up a solar project.
Mrs. Light, Councilor Geary here. Can I step in for a
Yes.
second with that? If you open up,
You bet.
if you open up chapter 173, which is the original Farm Viability Act that was dated 9/2/2003, it talks about farm viability definitions. Definition: small farm, a land of at least 5 acres together with principal and accessory buildings actively devoted to agriculture, horticulture, production, operated in individual partnership or cooperation that has filed with U.S. IRS Form 1040-F with the Internal Revenue Service in the state of Rhode Island. Farm tax number and has earned at least $2,000 or $2,500 income in the farm products in either of the preceding 2 years. So the idea of it only takes 1 year to become a farm is misinformation. That's right.
Oh, thank you so much for reading that.
It
Thank
is
you,
right.
because
Yep.
that's what I was getting to.
It's
Yeah,
right
the
there.
speaker earlier had mentioned that it was 1 year.
No, this is right out of the original Farm
Yeah,
Viability Act.
Councilor Geary, I was bringing that up because that was exactly the clarification that I was ready to provide. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank
so
you.
I can move on. There was also a comment made about backburnering this farm viability and this contamination issue until maybe after your budget hearings were done, maybe come back to it in September, et cetera. I think the town council and me as a taxpayer have the benefit of the Skolkos sponsoring this event. And in September, you are not going to have that. And I also believe, and Mr. Squirts, you can correct me, you actually have actually, it's not you, the town has a limited amount of time to process your request from start to finish. Am I right?
So that's right, that there is a provision about the amount of time that a municipality can process a zoning request, but I just put on the record again that we're willing to waive any timelines. We've already waived a timeline that would have passed back in January, and we're not trying to put any time pressure on the town.
Oh, that's great news. So would you be willing to wait until September, October?
If you did wait until September or October, if say you passed something and then came back to revisit it, I don't know if the Skolkos would hire me to come back at that point. I think at that point they'd probably say, well, they've gotten the first iteration passed, and anything beyond that, I probably wouldn't come back.
Okay. Well, they've made a tremendous investment. I applaud them. And if it was me with the investment, I wouldn't hang around either. So with the earlier comment that we had that the town council could actually backburner those two items until September, you would need to know that there would be no sponsorship from experts and the legal credibility that the Squirts have offered us. And again, let me say one more time, thank you. And I'm going to move on to my last comment over here, guys. It's regarding restricting a residential solar development to 125%. And Mimi made a really good point. She said that it's her objective to put some money into her retirement account instead of oil, and that's not such a bad objective. But what you guys have basically said is, if she comes to you and says, the grid says I need 126% to convert this property over to an energy efficient facility, that this town is going to say no. So I'd like to see the language loosened up to allow that exception. And at the last meeting I joined you guys with, I talked about a property where the homeowners have ground mounted and they have roof mounted and they have 2 electric charging stations in their driveway to juice up their cars. So good for them, they're blessed. But in the recent weeks, we have all heard about how GE plans to go battery operated. And yesterday, Jaguar announced that by 2025, their vehicles are going to be battery. They are not going to be gas. They're not going to be dependent on petroleum. So in the long term, and this could be 5 years, if you want a Jaguar, what you're saying is you can't do it at your house powered by solar panels. You actually have to go to Dan's place, plug yourself in for an hour, charge up your Jaguar, and then be on your way. You really need to think about the bigger picture going forward. We're being pressured into making decisions that we might not want to make with the way we power our vehicles, and it's going to continue to change. So if you could just be a little more creative about the way you talk about the limits to a resident, it would probably be helpful and calming to people like Mimi, who is under a different kind of pressure than I might be under my own circumstances here. And I do want to make one more comment to the group. I heard what Mr. Moreau was saying, and I heard different interpretations of what he might be saying. But what I heard him say was that the Skolkos apparently are very generous people, and they give to their communities. Being transparent, he brought that information forward. That's comforting to me as a neighbor. Also comforting is the fact that he is encouraging our town to be a little more transparent about the way we view people who are bringing different applications to the table. We're all asked to be accountable at the end of the day, and I see no harm in him communicating to us that they have a wider interest than what is going on here in Hopkinton. And the fact that they are being generous and giving us their contribution of Mr. Squirts to help us squirrel through an ordinance that was created at a time when this particular energy source was so young is hugely beneficial. So I think we should continue to take advantage of what they're offering, and there should be no insults taken by any of our residents that Joe or anybody else wants to bring some transparency to the situation. The fact that they have real estate investments, real estate investments in other communities is helpful. As a neighbor to the Skolkos property, I find it comforting that I could go and take a look at what their investments look like. Okay, so if they have additional interests for their property here in Hopkinton, we should be aware of that. And if we like the way their other investments look, we should welcome that. And if we don't like the way their other investments look, then we should be aware of that and make our decisions that way. I don't think there was any intention to bring any derogatory views to what the Skolkos are representing. I think what Mr. Moreau has been consistent of all along is that we need transparency in our community so that we can all be comforted in all the decisions that we're making. As a town council, as a planning board member myself, as a taxpayer, I appreciate this additional insight. I'm gonna end by saying thank you so much for your time and good luck.
Hey, Carol.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next up, Carol DeRosiers. If you could just state your name for the record, Carol, please.
Carol
So,
DeRosiers.
when I brought up the farm viability thing, Gary said, Miss Light, I'm going to interrupt you and read you.
All set?
I think so, yes.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Carol DeRosiers, Pleasant View Drive. Just 3 quick comments. I think it will be difficult to have the ordinance accommodate all unique individual cases such as was represented, I think, by Ms. Carlson. But I think we have to remember to try and accommodate the majority of residents. For myself, I am concerned about being too opening up on the RFR 80 count for ground mounted solar because, I would prefer not to be subjected to a visual impact from my property, which would be a high likelihood from how my property is situated from some of my neighbors. So that's just one comment. Secondly, I do think it is important for us all to be aware of the 9 contaminated sites that were mentioned. I think it would be helpful for the public to understand where the exposure is. And I do like the idea that the ordinance would state something relative to an as of date for the number of contaminated sites. And third, in terms of regulating farms, I absolutely think something needs clarification in that space. When the farm I don't know the sections, but when solar was allowed on the farms initially, some of the early farms, such as the Reynolds Farm and the farm on Arcadia, were not necessarily installed in a way that would be pleasing to the neighbors and the neighborhood. And then once the current PSCS was put in place, more regulations came into play that applied to the farms as well, so that when the Sposato farm came along and was in front of the planning board at 40 Maxon Hill, there was more assurance for the neighbors in terms of buffering, runoff, etc. So we've got to be very careful that we do not lose those protections for the neighbors, because again, zoning and everything that zoning entails is really to protect all of us who have expectations on what our rights are relative to what our neighbors can do. So that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Hey, Carol.
Up next. Looks like 1701. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Sherry Aronian, Dye Hill Road. Can you hear me?
You can.
Thanks. Just a question for the council regarding the contaminated sites. Has the council firmed up a definition of what they're going to use for contaminated sites? A definition in the ordinance now that you're considering them?
Mr. Council President, I could, this is Peter.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I could read that definition if you like.
Yes, please.
So it's firm that you have decided on the definition then?
From the workshop before.
Okay, I just wanted to what my question was to make sure that it wasn't
Yes, we
still
have a
open for
definition.
discussion. Okay, and that's etched in stone. I can certainly read that. I didn't know if the definition, I understand you're going to put the contaminated sites in there as a use. I just didn't know if the actual definition had been cemented.
Attorney Squires, could you answer that?
Sure. Well, so I guess nothing is entirely set in stone until you vote to pass the ordinance. But I do have a working definition based on the comments that I've received from the council thus far. That seems like it is pretty solid to make it through to the end. And that includes, I did put language about limiting it to sites designated as of February 16th, 2021. That's something for the council to consider, but with that in there, it currently reads, contaminated site solar energy system is a solar energy system located on a contaminated site pending remediation, or a remediated and restricted contaminated site. And a contaminated site solar energy system shall be reviewed as a major land development. And then that ties into the next definition, which says contaminated site pending remediation is a property that has been identified and confirmed by Rhode Island DEM as of February 16th, 2021, as being contaminated through issuance of a letter of responsibility, but which it has not yet been remediated to the satisfaction of DEM.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Squires, for reading that. So pretty much the council is going with that definition as of now, or is that? I guess that was kind of my question: is how the council was viewing that definition, or
This
is it still?
This is Councilor Moffitt here. We have not changed the definitions of contaminated sites as were read by Attorney Squires. Those definitions were carried over from the or stayed in this proposed amendment. The words were not changed on these, so the definitions that you see here were in the original proposal.
Okay, Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sherry.
That's all I have. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, up next. Doug, if you could just state your name for the record, please.
Doug Sabetti, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks for unmuting me. My name is Doug Sabetti. I'm the owner of Newport Solar, a residential solar installation company in North Kingstown. I read the ordinance and listened to all the comments, obviously. The first thing that I should clear up for everyone is system sizing is based on state statute, and National Grid scrutinizes applications to determine if any PV system size meets the definition of, producing 100% of on-site usage. On-site usage changes. Some people get electric cars. Some people switch their electric appliances to gas. So usage goes up and down all the time. And if you're adding electric usage to your current bill, if you have the same electric bill for 20 years and all of a sudden you got an electric car, well, then your usage goes up and you submit a receipt to National Grid. You say, I bought this new electric load. Here's what it's going to use. Here's my proposed system output, and it gets approved. Town councils and boards, in my experience in 10 years doing this, cannot supersede the state statute. So the system sizing is all defined. And another thing, I think it was Mary Carlson who was talking about energy offset. Well, solar produces electricity. No, it doesn't produce fossil fuels. You can't offset fossil fuel usage that you're actually using with electricity. If you're burning oil and gas and you want to switch over and eliminate your fossil fuels, well, then you're going to replace your fossil fuel systems with electric systems. And those electric systems will have usage and they'll have estimated usage, and you submit that to National Grid and they say, okay, that's added to your current usage. So your system output is only allowed to be X, and that's what they'll approve. So you guys don't have to be system sizing experts in energy transfer and all of that. That's all been figured out by the state and National Grid and PUC. As far as ground mounts systems in the statute or in the proposed ordinance right now, it says special use permit. Not even allowed in R1 zones or some certain zone. And I asked Councilor Davis, well, our swimming pools and sheds and playground sets and any other accessory structure any homeowner or property owner wants to use their property for allowed in those lots? And she said, yes, they are. So solar systems are being treated uniquely, which is probably not a good idea, because that seems to me like it opens up for complaints. Sounds like discrimination. We don't want to see this type of thing in your yard, so you're not going to be allowed to have it. Whereas if it were a shed or something else, we don't mind seeing that, so you can have that. So that to me is problematic. And being under the special use permit, it is not allowed to be permitted with the special use permit in conjunction with a setback variance. And the setback restrictions are 100 feet sides and rear. That seems overly restrictive. Again, if somebody wanted to put a swimming pool within 10 feet of their property line and got a variance and they were allowed to do that, or, a big shed and paint it orange, the neighbors would have to look at that. So I don't see why solar structures have to, meet requirements that nothing else and that some homeowner or property owner wants to do with their land has to do. So this seems like they're being singled out. So I would recommend following what every other town in the state has done, which is treat a ground-mounted residential solar system. We're not talking about solar fields here. Treat them like any other accessory structure. It goes through the zoning process. It has setbacks, height requirements, guarding requirements, fencing requirements. These are all National Electric Code requirements also that cannot be superseded and also have to be followed. Going to the roof mount restrictions. And I'm not even reading the ordinance. This is just off the top of my head. The setbacks, we've gone through this with many, many towns in the state. No city or town can supersede state building code or national electric code or national fire code on 1 to 3 family dwellings and try to implement something like a 3-foot setback rule for solar panels. That just isn't simply allowed by law. And unfortunately, some towns have passed ordinances with these setbacks, and then we and the homeowner then are put in the position that Ms. Carlson was talking about, where we're working class people. Now we have to hire professionals and everyone else and spend our time trying to educate the building official on how what he's trying to enforce is unenforceable. And then we have to get the state code commissioner involved and he gets angry. And then, we have to bug them because we can't get our permit to do our job. And the homeowner can't get the solar that they want to invest in. Then the state building code commissioner has to get in touch with the building official. What's going on over there? You can't do that. Give them their permit. Oh, well, it's going to fire marshal for review. It can't go to fire marshal review. It's 1 to 3 family dwelling unless it's a smoke detector. So it just creates all of this wasted time between homeowners, contractors, and the building officials. And then when it's all said and done, the homeowner gets to install solar according to the state building code. The building official is all upset and not happy. The fire marshal is not happy. We're not happy as a contractor because we've lost money on this job now, putting in all this extra time. So what we've suggested in the years we spent with the state Office of Energy Resources and pretty much every organization, official in the state about trying to create solar siting legislation, all solar ordinances have to comply with state code, which is why they suggested working in tandem with Office of Energy Resources to make sure that all of the rules that the town is coming up with comply with state code, and we're not going to create situations where they conflict with state code, and then we get into the scenario like I described earlier. So there's problems, and this is just the residential. I'm not concerned with commercial. We don't install commercial systems. And what I'm afraid is happening here in Hopkinton with this ordinance is what I've seen happen in a lot of rural towns in Rhode Island, where there is solar sprawl. These companies come in, write zoning amendments for the town adopts them, and then they go in and bulldoze the forest and put in these giant solar farms. Nobody's happy with it. Nobody. We spent years, you wouldn't believe the testimony from residents and organizations and solar developers even. I oppose that. I support smart solar siting. But I feel that residents, taxpayers are being, they're kind of getting punished because of these bigger solar farms and the solar sprawl. When really, somebody putting 10 solar panels, 15, 20 solar panels on their roof really doesn't have the same effect as, 5 acres of solar panels, but yet we kind of are getting treated the same. I think it was Councillor Moffett was talking about, and Ms. Carlson talking about, wanting to do all of this for the environment. Well, being a solar installer sells residential solar systems for 10 years. Let me tell you, the environment is not the reason people end up investing in solar. The reason they end up spending the money, they might want to do lots of good things, but it's not worth $20,000 or $25,000. People are putting solar on their roofs and in their yards because it's the first opportunity they've ever had to produce their own power and not be under the monopoly of the utility. Think about that. First time ever you can make your own power and not be under the monopoly utility. So homeowners have this first in their lifetime opportunity to invest in their own power usage. And Mrs. Carlson is right on track. Convert all of your fossil fuels to electric, install all the solar to produce 100% of that usage. And now you're not paying for your utilities anymore. And it's a great retirement plan. But to restrict residents and their ability to make that investment and alleviate themselves of, upwards of $20,000 in utility bills over the course of, 15, 20 years. I just think you need to consciously separate residents and taxpayers trying to make this investment to save money in their retirement with giant solar developments, those are commercial entities, those are business transactions. That's a lot different than like what I did in my own home. I didn't have a retirement plan. So instead of trying to save millions of dollars for retirement, I'm eliminating all the bills I can in retirement. I converted my entire house to electric. I'm getting 2 electric cars, and I'm going to install solar. My retirement bills will be, mortgage and insurance and food. So it's an investment, and residents aren't doing this, to cash in and make lots of money. They're just doing it as an investment so they can afford to retire. So just hope that you all would, again, consciously separate in your minds what the residents and taxpayers are trying to do to save money on their own property, and the bigger solar developments that are bulldozing the trees and clear cutting and creating this uproar and all of this opposition that we're seeing. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jim, did you want to say something? I saw your hand was up. Jim,
Yes,
here.
yes, Mr. Chairman. I think I will. I think I'll reserve my comment for a later time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay. Joe Moreau.
Hi, Joe Moreau from Old Depot Road. Thank you, Carolyn, for your comments. Mr. Heil, you have completely missed my point. All I will say is that we can agree to disagree. I have the right to express my opinions, and I will continue to do that. I have disagreed with you on several of your comments in the past, and I've said nothing. That is your opinion. I've heard several comments from you concerning this, and I am greatly disappointed. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Joe. There's
You're welcome.
Mr. President, Councilor Hurst, this is, this is a reminder. I
We
believe
can't
that-
hear you, Scott.
I'm sorry, Scott Bill Hurst, Counselor. I just want to, looks like from the clock in the town hall, it's about 25 after 9. Usually we try to adjourn around 10, and we do have the regular agenda for the rest of the agenda for this evening. I just want to make that reminder. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I have one more hand up, and that's what I'm going to limit it to. And then after that, we're going to move right through the rest of this here. And if we need to make a 15-minute extension, we'll make a 15-minute extension to complete our work here. Next up, Barbara, please state your name for the record.
It's Barbara Capalbo from Ashaway in Rhode Island, in Hopkinton. I have a comment and a question. One, I wanted to thank Sharon Davis for putting the S under the manufacturing district for contaminated sites. I think that is very wise, and I think that is good common sense. We want to be able to remediate contaminated sites. I would also like to remind everyone that Hopkinton only got zoning around the 1970s, which means for easily 100 years before that, we did anything we chose. And Hopkinton, specifically Hope Valley and Ashaway, were known as manufacturing and industrial districts. They weren't just commercial, which means there are any number of commercial sites that are probably contaminated that you have no idea of because they've never been sold or they've never been addressed. But I'm sure there's quite a number on the commercial side, not just on the manufacturing side. And the S on manufacturing, I also really appreciate because that at least allows Stubbtown Road to go through if you so choose. And then my other question was, oftentimes you talk about residential, but we have both R1 and RFR 80, and this is specifically for ground-mounted solar. So I'm assuming you do not mean there will be ground-mounted solar on R1, which is less than 2 acres, that you mean that ground-mounted solar will be on RFR 80, which is residential and farm. Is that correct? Or
That is
do you
correct,
also
Barbara.
mean it- Okay, so you don't mean it on R1.
Nope.
And I did want to say the only issue that I have with ground-mounted solar on RFR 80 is one of the things that this ordinance was supposed to prevent is not just solar sprawl, but you're basically going to have solar litter everywhere because most of our properties are RFR 80, which means everyone on their properties can now do ground-mounted solar, not just house-mounted, which is sometimes far easier. I think you're going to have your hands full at the planning board and the zoning board, but that's up to you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
Hey,
Yes, go ahead, Council Geary.
Mr. President, Council Geary here. Before we get too carried on, can we go back to the part about the Farm Viability Act that Attorney Schwartz brought up, where we could either leave it or we could completely take it off this ordinance? I can't remember how we worded it. It was a little while back.
Yeah, so what do you have to add to that? Is that what you just want to comment on that, or you have?
I'd like to have Peter go back in and tell us what he had said about the two options we have.
I could comment on that, Mr. Council President. This is Peter Squires for the applicants. My suggestion was that, so basically right now, the ordinance you have won't touch the current ordinance for farm viability. But it does leave an ambiguity, which is farm viability defines their solar there as accessory. So then the question would be, does the regulations regarding accessory in this ordinance apply to that? There's nothing expressly saying one way or the other. I think as a general rule, you would say it wouldn't, just because the farm viability is more specific than the general requirements for accessory solar. But that wouldn't be guaranteed. That's the type of thing where a court could kind of come down on either side. So my suggestion would be you could clarify the issue one way or the other just by putting in this ordinance a sentence that either says this ordinance does not apply to the farm viability ordinance, or a sentence that says it does apply to the farm viability ordinance. Just to clarify, so that if someone comes in under the farm viability ordinance at some point in the future, and the question comes up, do they have to comply with the setbacks requirements, the lot coverage requirements, the 125% requirement that's put in this section? Right now, that's not entirely clear. So just one sentence in this section to say either yes, they do, or no, they don't, would clarify that.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. President, Councilor Gear here. I would go with the option one that Peter is offering, remove it completely from this ordinance.
So you want to remove the farm viability ordinance from this ordinance? Does that make sense, Peter? Or
So just to be clear, I'd put in a sentence saying this ordinance shall not apply to accessory solar as permitted by the farm viability ordinance. And that way, if you go under the farm viability, you just go under the farm viability, and you wouldn't have to refer to this ordinance.
Councilor Geary, is that what you're recommending?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. President.
So Councilor Geary, you're saying you don't want this ordinance that we are discussing now to affect the farm viability ordinance at all? Is that what you're?
Yes, Mr. President, Councilor Geary, yes. I'm going with the Peter's recommendation on. So in other words,
Because I think, sure. So I will give you some of my comments here, and again, I'll give my comment. And it's going to sound like we're going to need to probably schedule another date for this hearing and to keep it going. I mean, that's what's going to be required to do our due diligence regarding it. But I think if the council and our intent is to stop large scale solar,
well,
I think we need to again, I think we need to revisit some things. So regarding that, I am not 100% for continuing the PSES the way that it's worded in the farm viability ordinance. I think there needs to be some more details hammered out moving forward. So with that said, I would kind of reserve putting that in there for now until we have a broader discussion.
Mr. President, Councilor Geary, I'd like to hear what the other
as to how the farm viability. Sure. Sharon, do you have any comment?
I think the farm viability ordinance needs to be taken separately and really evaluated separately.
That's what I'm saying too. That's my. I agree with Sharon. I think it needs to be handled separately. I think it needs to just. I think there needs to be a broader discussion on it, and I think it needs to be just cleaned up and not just plopped in like it was when it was added to the farm viability ordinance. So, Council Marvel, do you have anything to say about that, or anything to comment on?
I would agree that we need to take a look at the farm viability ordinance and dive into that. But I guess that's it. I agree with you guys.
Councilor, Mr. President, Councilor
Yes.
Geary, I think the general consensus is somewhere down the road, we probably need to go ahead and revisit the Farm Viability Act with the understanding that all the commissions and boards that kind of represent that area have some input.
100%. I agree 100% with that, Council Geary. I think it should be a group effort. It's probably obviously worthy of a workshop to discuss and to really go through it. I think if we're going to go through this whole ordinance and this whole solar ordinance, that we have to analyze it all. And I think for the sake of kind of moving forward with our ordinance, I think that's the route that we should take. And I'm assuming, like you just said, you think we need input from other boards and commissions, that you would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm on board, Mr. President, Council Geary. Yeah, I'm on board with that. But I mean, there's a few things we need to get through. A, this, B, budget, and all the other things that we got lined up in front of us right now before we go into the next thing.
I agree. So with that being said, we will, I'm trying to think here. So
Can I can I make a motion that we continue the hearing on the solar to and we need to pick another date?
Absolutely.
And I also wanted to make sure that Attorney Schwartz is going to add in that contaminated stuff so we can see what it looks like again. I'm sorry.
I do have a draft ready to submit to you that I've been kind of typing on as people have been discussing tonight.
Great.
And then I guess as far as the farm viability, it's been flagged in discussion. I won't put anything in there now and kind of leave it open. And that way, I guess when you come back, you can make that final decision on how you want to address farm viability.
Okay.
If that sounds good.
it does sound good.
Yep.
Thank you. So if you'd like to make a motion, Sharon, to
Yes, I make a motion that we continue this hearing. And we need to have a date from Lisa.
Do we have a second?
yes.
Second,
Council Geary.
Marvel.
Okay, so I'm looking at the
I'm
calendar.
sorry. Who seconded? I didn't hear who seconded.
Council
Bob
Marvel.
Marvel.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
This is Lisa Cook Martin. I am reviewing the calendar. And you have a number of meetings. You have 2 budget workshops next week on the 22nd and the 25th. You have a regular town council meeting on the 1st of March. And then you have another budget workshop on March 8th and another regular council meeting on the 15th. Did you want
Okay,
to
so
select one of your?
I think
ahead.
the first would be fine. Is everyone in agreement at the regular town council meeting?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
we got one on what, the 22nd next Monday night, which is the regular, or it's the town budget next Monday night, right?
Right.
Yeah, Monday and Thursday.
Right. So, I mean, I say we continue this till our next regularly scheduled town council meeting. So we're not adding any more. Is there room on
So that's March 2nd.
added or to add that, Lisa, for March 1st
March 1st.
or whatever?
It's a Monday.
Yes.
Can I ask when is that vote, the referendum?
The budget, there are 2 things on March 2nd. This is Lisa Cook Martin. March 2nd is the district financial meeting for Terre Haute, and March 2nd is also the statewide referenda.
So do you need to have the 1st off to set up?
No, I think it'll be
Okay.
all set. But thank you for thinking of me.
I was thinking the same thing.
All right, March 1st. I like it.
Okay. So all in favor of continuing this this public hearing to March 1st? All in favor?
Aye. Council Geary, aye.
Counselor
Davis, aye.
Hurst, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Moffett, aye.
That will be at 7 p.m.
Yes, Lisa.
And
Very good.
Steve, this
Yes,
is Sharon Davis. can I tell people that to the contaminated site, if you just Google Rydom contaminated site and then pick site inventories, and then over to the left, there'll be a section called Site Remediation and Brownfields Program. And there will be there's a PDF and then there's an Excel spreadsheet. You can view it, the list by either one of those, and you can load it, and you could go find the town of Hopkinton, and you'll see it. You'll see the 9 sites. It's very easy.
Thank you. Okay, up next, consent agenda. Approved town council remote workshop meeting minutes of January 27th, 2021. Accept the following monthly financial activity report. Town clerk, approve refund due to overpayment by taxpayer on 2017 motor vehicle tax submitted by the tax collector. Do I have a motion to approve?
Councilor Hurst, I move
make
that
a
we approve the
motion.
consent agenda.
Sharon Davis seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hurst, aye.
Moffat, aye.
Davis, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Motion passes. Okay, up next, old business. Discuss, consider, and vote on a motion to either approve or reject the proposed amendment to Chapter 250 Hope Valley Waterline Distribution System Ordinance to add to the prohibited activity section. Item G, every property within a district may not increase development beyond the lot's current Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management approved on-site wastewater treatment system. Following the completion and closing of the public hearing on February 8th, 2021. Is there any discussion on this?
Mr. President, Councilor Geary, I think we had put a timeline on that, and I have not heard anything, or have not gotten any emails or any correspondence from anybody on this subject.
Okay, Counselor Moffat, I too have not received any opposition or any feedback or anything in regards to this from any residents. Is there any discussion? Anything else? Do I have a motion to approve?
Councilor Hurst, I move to we approve this proposal ordinance.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. President, Councilor Geary.
All in favor?
Aye.
Councilor Hurst, aye.
Marvel,
Davis, aye.
Moffat, aye. Motion passes. Okay, up next, new business. Discuss, consider, and possibly vote to appoint a substitute municipal court judge to hear a housing matter Judge Steele has a conflict with.
Councilor Hurst, I'm going to abstain. I'm not going to recuse, but I had an issue with the municipal court some time ago. This doesn't concern me as I understand it, but I'm going to abstain out of, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Lisa, do we have any information on that? I think Ms. Steele is here online. Do we need any information about this?
She may be. She provided a letter.
Okay.
Yeah, he gave a suggestion of a name.
Good evening, Mr. President and honorable members of the Town Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Margaret Steele. I'm the
Hello,
municipal.
how are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Excellent.
Good. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. This has only come up one other time in the years that I've been sitting. And at that time, Judge Linda Urso sat for me on the conflict matter. That was on a traffic matter. I'm not sure her comfort level with matters pertaining to housing, However, I have sat in Westerly Municipal Court when that judge has had a conflict. So we do have a relationship where we sit for one another if this comes up. There's also the opportunity to utilize attorney Michael Cozzolino, who is the prosecuting lawyer for the town of Hopkinton. He handles the police misdemeanor calendar. I have spoken to him. He's also willing to handle this conflict matter if the town council sees fit.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Are there any objections, or are you recommending Mr. Cozzolino?
Absolutely. If the town
Okay.
council sees fit to appoint him, I would think that he would be an excellent recommendation.
Is there any discussion on this? Any
Mr. President, Council Gary, no, I think,
any discussion from the councilors? We've already appointed. What's that, Council Gary?
no, I have no conflict. I think we should make a motion to approve it.
Okay, go ahead and make the motion.
Mr. President, Council Gary, make the motion, we approve the recommendations from Attorney Steele.
Four.
Substitute municipal judge, a court judge.
Would that be Mr. Cozzolino or Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Cozzolino. Is
We
there a
have motion.
second?
Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Second.
This is Bob Marvel. I'll second the motion to appoint Attorney Cozzolino as recommended by Attorney Steele.
All in favor?
Council Gary, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Davis, aye.
Moffat, aye. Motion passes.
Counselor Hurst abstain.
Excellent. Motion passes.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Okay,
care.
up next, here we go. Discuss, consider, and possibly vote to appoint Clifford Hale Jr. as alternate to the Zoning Board of Review. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I'm going to vote against this nomination. I think Mr. Hale is a very intelligent guy, but I'm concerned with his objectivity, and I'm also concerned about him serving on the Zoning Board of Review. But I'm going to support him on the Wood Pocket Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council. The Zoning Board of Review is a quasi-judicial board where you have to apply the zoning regulations to specific cases. And the decisions of the Zoning Board of Review can only be appealed to the Superior Court or a court system. Also, the question for me is he going to be a good fit? I don't have a problem, like I said, with him being on the Wood Pocket Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council. And there is another candidate that's willing to step forward. The concern with and I had talked to Attorney Seipel today, is we cannot appoint anybody temporarily. We did have a candidate that was willing to step in, but I understand that wouldn't have worked. Another candidate. I would also note that the only person on the five of us on the present town council is Mr. Gary, who served on the zoning board previously to being elected to the council. And as I said, I will support Mr. Heil for the Wood Pocket Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Steve, this is
Yes,
Sharon
Sharon.
Day.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I would support Clifford Hale as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Review. I think he would be great.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
Mr. President, Council Gary.
Go ahead, sir.
Here's my thoughts. I cannot support Cliff Heel on being on zoning. If we're earlier when you talked tonight on a different subject on the zoning ordinance, probably gave a good 15-minute dissertation on water. Somebody like that who's got a degree or some kind of background in water would make a perfect person for the watershed activity. So I would support him on the watershed, but I cannot support him on zoning.
This is Bob Marvel. I would say I support Chip Hale because of his background as someone who has that kind of scientific and engineering background in protecting wetland. I think he actually would fit well into that position.
This is Councilor Moffett. I'm going to support Cliff Hale. I think he's a great fit for this position, and I look forward to him serving on the board. So
And he can be on both.
So do I have a motion? Bob, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a, this is Bob Marvel. I'll make a motion that we accept Clifford Hale's appointment to the alternate position for the zoning board.
Do I have a second?
Second, Sharon Davis, I second it.
All in favor?
Marvel, aye.
Moffat,
Davis,
aye.
Gary, no.
Chris, no.
Motion passes. Clifford Hale is appointed as the alternate to the zoning board of review. Up next, discuss, consider, and possibly vote to reappoint Sherry Ryan to the Recreation Commission. Is there any discussion?
I make a motion that Sherry Ryan be reappointed to the Recreation Commission.
Sharon Davis, I second the motion.
All in favor?
First, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Davis, I.
Moffat, aye.
Council Geary, aye.
Motion passes. Sherry Ryan is appointed to the Recreation or reappointed to the Recreation Commission. Next up, number 3, discuss, consider Clifford Hale Jr. to the Pawcatuck Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council.
Mr.
Any
President,
discussion?
Councilor Hurst, I move that we appoint Clifford Hale Jr. to the Pawcatuck Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council.
Or a second.
Is that a second or a motion?
All in favor?
Aye. First, aye.
Geary, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Davis, I.
Moffat, aye.
Davis, I.
Okay, up next, number 4, discuss, consider, and possibly vote to appoint Stephen Wheel to the Juvenile Hearing Board. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, Council Geary, I think make a motion, we should approve Steve to the Juvenile Hearing Board.
Councilor
Excellent.
Hurst, second.
All in favor?
Councilor
Marvel,
Hurst,
aye.
Davis, I.
Moffat, aye. Excellent. Stephen Wheel is appointed to the Juvenile Hearing Board.
Excellent.
Up next, it's a public forum. I only see, hold on, we got a couple of hands here. Joe, go ahead.
Hi, Joe Moreau, Old Depot Road. You know, I heard a few times mentioned tonight about the budgeting process, and I saw several posts on the Facebook page about different issues with the budgeting process. But unfortunately, at the last budgeting workshop, there was one resident that took the time to be part of that discussion. My suggestion would be is that residents need to make the time if they want to be part of this budgeting process. Brian Rosso, the rest of the council, and other staff members spend a lot of time to develop these budgets. And I believe it's important that we have input from our residents that may have questions about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Up next, there's only 2 more. I'm only going to entertain 2 more for the public forum because we're right at 10 o'clock here. So if your number ends in 0977, Go ahead, state your name. I'm sorry, go ahead. Is this Luann? If your number ends in 0977, you have the floor. Please state your name for the record. Okay, I'm not hearing anything.
This is Bob. I think that person is still muted on their end.
Okay.
You just have to do, what is it, *9?
Okay.
Then *6.
Yes, *6. Okay, I'm going to skip that for now. Up next, 2294. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Mimi again. Listen, if you want to stop the big solar while you're still doing this zoning ordinance, the Lake Tahoe Supreme Court case could override anything the state puts in terms of, prerequisites to having to deal with applicants. And the court case is Tahoe-Sierra Preservation Council, Inc. versus Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And what it did was that they put in, which side of it is, and I have not read it yet, I read it years ago. They put in a moratorium, and the people involved in the development of a particular watershed area of the lake, there had been a lot of runoff and sedimentation in the lake. And so the town put in a moratorium, and the people who were developing, claimed that it was a taking. And it went all the way up to their moratorium was taking of their property and their property rights. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and essentially the decision was that any town or municipality or governing agency has the right to call a moratorium to make their regulations more protective. So if, in fact, your lawyers look this case up, I think you would be able to find a good wording that would say all applications are blocked for a moratorium period of a certain time, and use exactly that excuse that you're tightening up regulations.
Could you state that case again for me?
Tahoe, Tahoe -Sierra Preservation Council, Inc. versus Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And that would override any state. I've told this to numerous lawyers for the town, and they continue to ignore it. But I think if you all feel that you've got to tighten up on your regs, you create a moratorium for 90 or 120 days, you stop all applications for solar until you tighten up your regs, and this particular decision by the Supreme Court of our land says you're perfectly justified in order to make a more protective ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yep, thank you very much. All right, one last person here. I want to just try it again. Is this Luann? I think I recognize the number. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Councilor Hurst, I move that we adjourn this council meeting.
Do I have a second?
Mr. President, Councilor Gary, I second it, and can you text me after the meeting?
Yes. All in favor?
Hurst, aye.
Marvel, aye.
Moffat, aye.
Davis, aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night, guys.
Good night.